Yeah.
Shenanigans.
All right, Robbie Rock, you've got a discussion about Noah Green, the young man who killed a Capitol police officer this week. Also, just
All of
Yeah.
his
happened right down
death.
the street from
All of his
Lizzie as
death.
well.
All of his
Everything
death.
happened in Lizzie's neighborhood. It's
That's right.
going downhill.
Is this truth, lies, or shenanigans?
This is some sad truth. On Friday, April 2nd, the DC Capitol, the Capitol in DC was the location of another fatal attack, as we know. One officer was killed and another hospitalized after Noah Green rammed his car into a security barrier near the U.S. Capitol building. I know that U.S. Capitol Police Chief Yogananda Pittman was quoted as saying, "It is with profound sadness that I share the news of the passing of Officer William Billy Evans this afternoon from injuries he sustained following an attack on the North Barricade by a lone assailant." Um, so essentially, he rammed the barricade, then he got out with a knife and he started lunging aggressively towards Capitol officers, where they shot and then he later died in hospital. Now, they've been diving into his social media because this was a 25-year-old young man who was going through a difficult time. And according to the Washington Post, this was a promising football player, but then he was expulsed because of some drugging issues. So he blamed his former roommates and teammates for drugging him with Xanax. And he's reached out to friends saying he was in a really bad situation and needed help. One of the quotes that from his social media that's being passed around, that's trending right now, is that he was saying, "To be honest, these past few years have been tough, and these past few months have been tougher. I've I've been tried with some of the biggest unimaginable tests in my life. I am currently now unemployed after I left my job, partly due to afflictions, but ultimately in search of a spiritual journey. I consider myself I can so when he's talking about Louis Farrakhan, he refers to him as the Messiah, and he considers him his spiritual father. Without his guidance, his word, and his teachings that I've picked up along the way, I would have been unable to continue. So, to me, this is just a young man who had a world of opportunities opening up above him, and because of a series of bad choices, saw those opportunities dwindle and disappear, and then dove into someone's radicalized version of Islam, if you will. Louis Farrakhan is not the founder of Islam. That would have been the Prophet Muhammad a few hundred years before that. But Farrakhan absolutely radicalized it in the US, and it became just a banner for people to get behind so that they had a voice. This young man felt that he found a voice, but unfortunately, it led him to take grave action. So I want to get reaction from my co-host because again, this is another tragic loss of life. This is a young man who was in duress, who was in crisis, but unfortunately didn't seem to have anywhere to turn to except for attacking the seat of power. Lizzie, I would love to get your thoughts on this.
I think one, because a lot of people, and I think I've had to check myself in assessing situations like this. When you hear that the suspect had some level of mental illness and they were spiraling down. And the first question is, well, what was the family doing? And I have to remind myself, it's very hard. Young man was an adult. And so it's very hard to have someone committed based on what you perceive is a mental breakdown. It takes a lot. You can't just say, "Oh, Gianni's crazy, so we're gonna throw her in, a mental hospital." That's not how it works. It's a long, tedious process. And so, in reading what the family has said, this young man was going through, I had to think about, what my reaction would be. But to your point about the angle in which this story is being pitched, I mean, I'm not surprised because we all know this country hates Muslims. This country hates the Nation of Islam. This country, when it's a person of color who has committed a crime or who has been suspected of committed a crime, they are going to dig up every single piece of dirt on them and put it on the front page. That's not to say that it's not valid, that it's not information that we should know. However, we really don't know much about the terrorists that charge the Capitol on January 6th. A lot of them, we don't know their backstory or their criminal history or their mental history or their religious, history or whatever. This is usually something that is afforded to someone who is non-white. Even if you look at the Boulder, Colorado shooter, in that
Mhm.
situation, that shooting, it's been what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks now?
Come on.
Um, 10 people were killed, including a police officer. So initially they were kind of, quiet about his identity and who he was because they thought he was white. And as soon as they realized that his parents are from Syria, I can't remember off the top of my head if he was born in Syria or not, but as soon as they realized that he had a Syrian connection, all bets are off. All bets are off. Oh, he's from the Middle East. He's Muslim. He's a terrorist. That's what happens when you are a non-white person of color in this country, but especially if you have any ties to um, being a Muslim, to the Nation of Islam. And I mean, Farrakhan, please, that was just like the icing on the cake. That was the icing on the cake. And it's sad because I do think, and again, I'm not making excuses for this young man at all, at all. But it does sound like that he was troubled. And
He
think about how we often afford white individuals in this country who commit these types of acts. The first thing that comes out, he was mentally ill. And we the media and a lot of our citizens here in the States, they give them a pass because they're white and they're mentally ill. Black people aren't afforded that same luxury. We are not afforded that same luxury at all.
So my thoughts are, the first thing that I looked up to see what Fox News wrote, and I thought it was interesting, their headline. So this was their headline: Capitol attack suspect identified as Louis Farrakhan follower Noah Green. Right, that's the first thing they said. Now, as many people know, Louis Farrakhan is very anti-white, sometimes
Anti-white,
anti-Semitic.
He's
anti-Semitic, yeah.
anti-Semitic.
He's uh, he's pretty. Matter of fact, little known fact, my mother was part of the Nation of Islam. So he joined the Nation of Islam. And what I found, um, watching that is, um, they tend to, that particularly the Nation of Islam, people who have problems, maybe mental illness, problems with drugs, problems with uh, home life or whatever, are drawn to that environment because it's very strict. They have very strict rules, and some people do need some of that structure in their lives, and they're drawn to that. But in addition to that, the Nation of Islam is very accepting of that. But I don't know that they have what's necessary to deal with people who may have the problem. My mother was I would consider, has a mental health issue, and there was no help for her. It was just they'd kind of deal with it. With that being said, um, and I'm kind of going off a little bit on a tangent, but Louis Farrakhan is a pretty divisive person, and so it's not surprising that the first thing that um, Fox News throws up is the fact that Louis Farrakhan is uh, involved, or he's a follower of Louis Farrakhan because it denigrates the black person who attacked the Capitol and kind of puts it into a different perspective for the white people that attacked the Capitol, right?
Hmm.
Because there was a lot of conversation about white people attacking the Capitol, and it's- I just found that was an interesting aspect, that tends to be the case. That's what they do, is they kind of marginalize the situation. I mean, it's a terrible situation. It's a terrible thing that this person did. But it's just that aspect of how race and religion comes into it just kind of bothers me. Let's just focus on the fact that a Capitol Police officer died and a troubled youth did it. A troubled young man did it. Um,
Mhm.
that's what we should be looking at. That's what I believe.
And it's a non sequitur because as far as I can tell, and I'm not a follower of the Nation of Islam, I'm not a follower of Louis Farrakhan, but as far as I can tell, over the past few months, Louis Farrakhan hasn't really been inciting anyone to do anything.
No, he's
Like
been
this,
like, I
he
mean,
hasn't said anything. This is not the same situation as you have the president of the United States getting on national television telling people to march down to the Capitol. Two totally different situations. But like you said, Fox News is framing it in the same vein. In the same vein. And it's it's ridiculous.
I know me and
But
Lizzie
let's
took
be
up all the
honest, Louis
time. Let me get Gianni and
Farrakhan,
Robbie in there.
Farrakhan is 88 years old now. So, I mean, we're not hearing much from him because he doesn't have the energy level that he used to. He's born in 33. So, I mean, let's be real about it, too.
I feel like the National Guard were the government was on time this time. They had the helicopter, they had the lockdown, they had the National Guard mobilized. Like everything was on point. For a guy with a knife, which I'm not taking anything away from him, but the Boulder, Colorado shooter was at least shot in the leg only. You know what I mean? Like this man, did he? I didn't see it, but I didn't feel like he needed to be killed on site. But I could be, my opinion. Yes,
But let me just say, like the police officers were already there, and like he attacked police officers, and they responded. Whereas in Boulder, he attacked a grocery store, and the police had to come in after the fact. So it's a little bit different in terms of the response. I mean, but in what you're saying, Gianni, where was this heightened level of security on January 6th? Where was this heightened level on January 6th? Where there, because this was just one guy. And again, like you said, I'm not downplaying anything, but there were a lot of kid gloves out there on January 6th. They weren't even equipped to handle anything. Like a lot of those police officers on January 6th weren't even armed, unfortunately.
Let me get your comments, Robbie, your final comments before I get to these.
No, I really appreciate everybody's comments on this one. I appreciate the comments online also. And you're right. I mean, really, the media needs to get away from trying to put this in a wonderful little package that people will embrace. Okay, so this is what you need to be afraid of because the person who did this belonged to this ideology. Well, no, this is a person who was mentally and emotionally unwell. This is someone who was in crisis and needed help. Let's focus on what the root causes are there. So it's not going to be stimulus packages. It's going to be making sure that the financial systems that we have in place to keep people employed, to keep people gainfully employed, are in place so that people aren't losing their shirts left, right, and center. We just need to reimagine a lot of the economics of our society, but more specifically, we really need to focus on the mental health aspect of it because I think that we're failing globally, and the pandemic is just the prolonged isolation of the pandemic is proving that we haven't really focused on mental health enough as a people, and we're seeing it.
I feel like the pandemic brought out the ugly more. Like I feel like it's always been mental health issues in the Black community that weren't spoken about, but the pandemic just is like whoosh, like it's just forcing it on us. Like look at it now. Like look at all these.
We're a year into it, so I mean, people who weren't well before have now been isolated, and if you're in an echo chamber with your own thoughts, it can turn into a very dangerous situation, especially after it's had a year to ferment.
But also, particularly, like Gianni just said, particularly the mental health of the Black community or non-white people in this country. Because if you pay attention to current events or pop culture news or what's trending, there's a whole, across the country, there's a documentary, there's a whole Free Britney movement, Free Britney Spears movement in this country. People feeling bad based upon the fact that she has some level of mental illness and people think she's being taken advantage of.
We definitely
Right.
Black folks are not afforded that same level of heightened awareness here, that same level of activism here. So if we gonna free Britney, let's free all of the other mentally ill people in this country.
Free Kanye. Free Kanye.
All right, Chaotic
Well,
Neutral
except for
Podcast
Kanye.
says Happy
Except
Easter,
for Kanye.
everybody. Chaotic Neutral Podcast says Happy Easter, everyone.
Happy
So
Easter.
Thank you.
I'm gonna get to these
Hey.
comments really quick. Kevin Daxon said, "I knew he was black when he was shot." Jacqueline Robinson says, based on the Washington Post article, his family tried to help. Conservatives slept with joy when they found out that he was an admirer of Farrakhan. Olivia E. points out he's not anti-white. Disagree, but Jeanette Brown says they also love getting
He
to
is
drag.
anti-white and anti-Semite.
Yeah.
He's absolutely anti-white.
There's
Well,
a
except
lot of people debate about that, but he's
well, I mean, because
very
he's had
obvious that
relationships.
he is.
He's had relationships with white women, but that doesn't mean he's not anti-white.
Yeah, because he certainly has a lot of anti-white rhetoric. All right, the headline. So Jeanette Brown says they also love getting to drag Farrakhan any chance they get. Of course.
They do.
Jacqueline Robinson says, I think this was suicide by cop situation. The young man was in such despair and basically told his brother goodbye.
He did. He did.
So, all right,
did.
that's it
So
for Hot
sad.
Topics. Great job on the Hot Topics. Wonderful Hot Topics. Deep, in-depth, long. Deep for our for our party show for our 1-year celebration. So we're gonna have to lighten it up a bit. All right. So we are going to do our game show. Oh, wrong